Our next trendsetter is Dr. Venkat Mattela, founder and CEO of Ceremorphic Incorporated. Dr. Venkat Mattela is the founding CEO of Ceremorphic. Under Venkat's leadership, Ceremorphic has developed the first AI supercomputing architecture that addresses today's high-performance computing needs in reliability and power consumption at scale. Prior to Ceremorphic, Venkat founded Red Pine Signals, a wireless technology company that he sold to Silicon Labs Incorporated for $308 million in 2020. As a proven innovator, Venkat holds over 100 US and international patents, holds a PhD in electrical engineering, and is a graduate of Harvard Business School. So now I would like to call Dr. Venkat Mattela to speak on the domain trends on his company's unique value proposition.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to, before I forget the last speaker, Samir, I just want to reiterate the word that he mentioned, that whole product. He said the startup could be making any slice of the technology stack, but he is addressing the whole product. I just want to let you all know that we are doing something beyond that, complete supercomputing infrastructure for the future. With that introduction, I also want to remind the very first speaker that talked about the stack, where you have the cloud at the bottom infrastructure level, and then you have the open AI type of conversation or ChatGPT application and video platforms and applications at the top. I just want to remind that they were not there before, but still the whole world was working. That is, there was no open AI, no ChatGPT, but you did have enterprise applications, and the whole world was working. And the cloud infrastructure came around 15 years ago. But before the cloud, the world was working. So things happen. So it's just a question of to become efficient, certain things come at certain time. So nothing to worry in terms of what bad things will happen, people lose their job. It's all good. Everything is going to be good. So today I want to start off my discussion with a very positive note, and also I will be ending my talk with a very positive, so that you could all be very happy with the next session. So the bigger picture my title is, again, thanks Ram for inviting me, but I was very concerned initially that most of the people are very software and enterprise application oriented, so I was not sure how many of you would appreciate semiconductors. And I've been working in this industry for 35 years. But surprisingly, one of the investors, I think it was Ankur, I was pleasantly surprised when he mentioned about semiconductors, and he thinks that's where he wants to make investment. That was a very, very pleasant surprise for me. But my topic is today, semiconductors, what is next in the AI era. And like everybody else, I also use the word ChatGPT. I never used ChatGPT in my entire life. But today I saw almost except I think maybe one, everybody had ChatGPT all over. And you won't be missing even in mine, somewhere you'll find ChatGPT. But I'll be referring to it in the context of, to explain the concept, because everybody would understand if I connect ChatGPT to what I'm doing. So that's the context I use ChatGPT, and I'll explain about that. So there has been a tremendous growth in the semiconductor industry in the last few years. But you should ask the question, why is now? Semiconductors were there for last 50 years ago, microprocessors came into picture, and that's when there was a step function in growth. And in 2012, machine learning started detecting objects as good as human beings. Then there was a growth. And of course 15 years ago, cloud, then the somewhat semiconductor growth has happened. So now with the new AI adoption in all application segments, the growth of semiconductors has been tremendous. And my talk today is all going to be at the infrastructure layer. The diagram that Sudhakar drew, where there is a Azure layer, that's a cloud, and I'm going to talk about everything, what challenges exist designing supercomputer chips at the infrastructure layer, and how we are going to solve that. That's what I'm going to talk about. So when this evolution is happening from your microprocessors, AI, machine learning, and conversational AI, ChatGPT, and general intelligence. By the way, all the things that we talked about today, that it answers everything that you ask, just imagine that is a small fraction of the human intelligence. It's so small, you cannot even imagine. Just because you're getting excited that you can ask any question. But that's also detecting an object, a spatial. For example, human intelligence, by just looking at your face, I can imagine that this guy is not happy. No, we are not at that level. So all the things, whatever all the ChatGPT, everything does, is almost a super small fraction of human intelligence, and even that it does incorrectly sometimes. That because it does incorrectly sometimes, you have a lot of opportunity to fix that. That's why there's a lot of opportunity for everybody to make money. So as long as it does it incorrectly, that you have a lot of opportunity. So when these things happen, where does the growth happen? How do you do it? Right now we all get excited in terms of ChatGPT answering all these questions. But if you just think about what goes behind, not on the above. So far we talked about enterprise applications, asking questions, you're doing all this data sorting, data intelligence, all the things is fine. But who is going to create that for you? What is happening in the back end? And that's what I'm going to talk about. So there is a huge growth in terms of applications and all these things are happening. And we'll be heading towards general intelligence. What it means is that one day machines are going to do like human beings. Today there is a small fraction of that is happening. We are getting so excited. When that happens, the computing requirement would be phenomenal, exponentially growing requirement. And for the first time in the industry this decade, we are going to see a semiconductors going over $1 trillion. And right now, 10 years ago, if anybody talks about chips, you would not be knowing what is the chip industry. But because of the shortage, now everybody knows that, chip industry is the shortage of chips for buying cars, buying your washing machines. And along with the demand and as well as the market size, there is a technology development that is happening, that is in 1 square millimeter chip today, in 5 nanometers, you can have 40 million gates. Imagine the same thing when I was an engineer studying, it probably a room size computer. The room size computer 35 years ago has come to 1 square millimeter. I just want you to imagine what type of technology development has happened in the semiconductors over the years. So with those three things, this is the best time ever for the semiconductors. And I'm very fortunate I've been doing this for the last 35 years. And this particular chart shows in terms of the last 3 or 4 years, the growth has been more than the previous 3 decades. And that's a very significant to note. And I will also leave that the positive thing in the last slide and connect that one to what I think in terms of what's going to come. So with that introduction, there's very great things are happening, all positive. And I'm going to talk about what is the current challenge in the industry as far as the high performance computing is concerned. And why is high performance computing is required? As I mentioned today, the things are going towards more and more intelligent AI, that is general AI, that is like human being. When that happens, the amount of computing required is huge. Today, even for a ChatGPT, which is a conversational AI, the Microsoft invested $10 billion into OpenAI. It's all open information. Of course, you can type that in ChatGPT too. It will tell you where exactly they invested that money. You should try that. That money is invested in the form of Azure credits. Because if I tell somebody saying that high performance is needed, and everybody thinks that I want to develop application on top of OpenAI platform and doing software companies. But if you really look at, they invested not in the cash, they invest in Azure credits. That means to create applications like OpenAI, the background that happens is megawatts of power, millions of dollars of computing power is needed. It cannot be done just like that. That whatever you are trying to do in the inference where you ask a question, it's giving you an answer. But what happens to create application? It's not like your conventional procedural language-based enterprise application. Whatever your Microsoft Office, all your database that you've done in your life, all those applications do not require the type of computing power what ChatGPT requires. It just basically runs for months. It consumes megawatts of power. It costs tens of millions of dollars. You don't do that one with regular cloud computing. You just take some certain amount of bandwidth. So that's the requirement for the high performance computing. But now what happens is, how do you get this high performance computing? You don't get it with one processing chip. You need thousands and thousands of them connected in parallel. And that's when the right side curve I want you to refer to. When you connect many processing chips, every semiconductor chip, like in human beings, that also has age. It fails in the beginning, it fails while operating, and with age it ages and it fails. That's the life cycle of any semiconductor chip. If you have one chip, there is a probability of failure. But if you need very high performance, you have to use tens and thousands of chips. So your probability of failure happens. And that's what exactly this is called, a bathtub curve. And this curve is known in the industry. Any semiconductor chip goes through that process. And my advisor and a friend asked me, what I'm doing in this company in one sentence. And that's when I told him that I'm going to tell you, one sentence I told him, which of course the more marketing statement saying that I'm building next generation NVIDIA. But more than that, the straight line is my business plan. So what I'm building is that when the chips fail, when you have thousands and thousands of chips, it not only fails because there are thousands of chips, they dissipate a lot of energy. And in a particular building, the amount of computing power that you can have is not decided by what processing chip sits inside the building. It decided how much is the energy you are allowed to dissipate in a building. That means if you want to increase the performance, the only way to increase the performance is design the chips very efficient. So there is a reliability problem, there is a low energy problem. So those are exactly the two problems that I am addressing in this company. And that's where I talk about in terms of what we pay, but reliable and energy efficient supercomputing. That's the problem I'm solving. The straight line is my business plan where you cannot control the errors. That means if an alpha particle comes and hits your chip, one big tolls, that you cannot control the nature. If the environment that is temperature is changing, the chip fails, you cannot control. But I don't make my system fail you. Because the jobs that are running to do things like conversational AI application, those are not running for your 5 minutes, they run for a few months. When they run for a few months, if there is a failure, if you have to restart the job, you probably lost $30 million already. Not only the time that it takes to redo the whole thing. So it's very, very important to have reliability and low energy. And these two problems are not addressed anywhere in the industry today. It's not because people cannot do it, it's very difficult. And that's exactly what we are addressing. So as a company, we have a 160-member qualified team, and we have a facility in India, 30,000 square feet, nice building in Hyderabad. And the seed funding comes completely from founders, majority of them from our family, myself. And we have a $37 million seed money we put in. And somebody asked us that to do this kind of chip companies, you need hundreds of millions of dollars. Absolutely, you need that. But nobody gives you the money unless you prove that it's worth investing that kind of money. So that's one of the reasons that we put significant money into the company ourselves. And I had success with a previous startup company, I'll talk about that. And the manufacturing partners, we have TSMC and JSET Global. And these are very significant manufacturing partners. Only they don't. It's not easy to get access to these technology nodes. Pretty much 99% of the Silicon Valley big startup companies won't get access to this node. So we developed a chip in 5 nanometer. In fact, chip just came last month. I'll talk about that in the next slide. The history is that I did a technology company in the past. And what to note in that one is not the 300 plus million, but I did something which was 26 times lower energy than the best company in the industry, but that took me 15 years. So anything you want to do final and a very true engineering, it is a marathon. It's not like a sprint. You can't do that 2, 3, 4 years. It's not even to money. It requires a lot more passion to do things. So the message is that if you want to do something against established companies, they're very, very significant technical companies. You cannot just do something 2x better. It's not going to cut. So that's something that I've done in the past, and we did 26 times lower energy. My expertise is in designing chips with a low energy consumption, and I'm taking that expertise from wireless space into computing. So how are we solving it? Ownership and differentiation is a foundation layer technology. Our foundation layer technologies are key. And this is something that, a lot of people are very experienced, more experienced than me, and there may be some other juniors, but this might be very useful. And again, this is my view. That means it works for me. That's what I'm telling, this is what I've done. I don't just go and do a 2-3 years, go and do a chip. Because chip design is a very, very expensive process. That means it's almost like you want in the real estate business, location is everything. So similarly in the chip business, if you are in the infrastructure chip design business, everything is about sustainable differentiation. What does it mean? If I do something, if others can figure out in 6 months, you are already out. Even if they can figure out in 1 year, there's nothing you can do. Because the bigger companies are not somebody, they're not incapable, they're very, very capable. It's just that they have a different goal in terms of meeting the whatever the requirements, and since no competition is there, if you look at today the number one player almost gets 80% of the market share. If you have the 80% market share, you don't worry about you have to do some 10 new things for next quarter or the next year. So for a startup company, everything for me is a sustainable differentiation. That means I spent 5 years to date with my money, over $30 million, and I just only created a test chip with a $0 revenue. test chip is required to prove certain things to build a sustainable chip in the next 5 years. And I created a huge technology portfolio, around 217, around 20 are awarded, remaining things are various phases. And what did I do? If I had to create a chip that is going to be sustainable for next few decades, I just can't go ahead and design a chip, like many other startups, it takes hundreds of millions of dollars to do it. What I spent my first 5 years is to create very strong pillars.